Welcome back, you beautiful anomaly, you walking contradiction, you impossible equation they keep trying to solve with the wrong formula. They expected tears, they prepared for rage, they rehearsed your collapse 1,000 different ways. But when betrayal finally arrived, you gave them something they had never studied: silence. That silence became their obsession, because nothing terrifies people more than someone who refuses to break on command. They thought they knew your ending before you even lived it. They were wrong. Today, you're about to discover why your reaction became the one thing no one could predict, and why the people who underestimated you are still trying to understand the storm they accidentally created. There is a moment after betrayal that almost nobody talks about. It isn't the scream, it isn't the tears, it isn't the desperate search for answers. It's the terrifying silence that settles inside a person who has just realized the world isn't what they believed. That silence is dangerous, not because it destroys you, but because it begins destroying the version of you everyone else thought they understood. The people who betrayed you were expecting a performance. They had already written the script in their minds. They imagined the emotional collapse, the angry messages, the endless explanations, the public breakdown, the desperate attempt to repair what they had already chosen to destroy. They rehearsed your reaction before the betrayal even happened. What they never imagined was that you would refuse to play your assigned role. Most people believe power is loud. They think strength announces itself with revenge, arguments, or dramatic exits. But real psychological power often arrives without making a sound. The moment you stop feeding people the emotions they were expecting, you interrupt every calculation they made about you. Suddenly, they aren't watching someone they can predict. They're staring at a mystery they can't solve. People become comfortable when they think they understand your emotional patterns. They know which words hurt you, which memories trigger you, which fears make you react. They treat your mind like a machine with predictable buttons. Press this one, and you'll become angry. Press another, and you'll become insecure. Press another, and you'll start chasing their approval again. Betrayal is often built on that confidence. They believe they already know exactly what you'll do. Then something changes. Instead of exploding, you observe. Instead of begging, you disappear. Instead of defending yourself, you become impossible to read. That single decision creates psychological discomfort far greater than any argument ever could. Human beings naturally fear uncertainty. An unanswered question stays alive in the mind far longer than an answered one. By refusing to give them the emotional response they expected, you quietly place them inside the prison they designed for you. Now they're wondering, why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you calling? Why aren't you trying to fix this? Why do you seem calmer than before? Those questions begin echoing through their own minds because silence forces imagination to do the work. And imagination is almost always more frightening than reality. This doesn't mean you never felt pain. Don't confuse emotional control with emotional emptiness. Your heart still carried the weight. Your trust was still broken. The difference is that you chose not to let your pain become entertainment for the people who caused it. That choice changes everything. Pain shown to the wrong audience becomes fuel for manipulation. Pain transformed in private becomes fuel for evolution. The strongest people aren't those who never get hurt. They're the ones who refuse to let hurt dictate their identity. Every betrayal places two doors in front of you. Behind one door is the version of yourself that spends years proving people wrong. Behind the other is the version that becomes so powerful no proof is necessary. Most people choose the first door because it feels satisfying. Few choose the second because it requires patience, discipline, and the courage to let silence speak before success does. Think about how uncomfortable it makes someone when they can no longer measure their impact on your life. They expected to remain the center of your thoughts, yet they slowly realize they've become a forgotten chapter instead of the entire story. That realization is heavier than any insult you could ever throw at them. There is another reason your unexpected reaction unsettles people. Betrayal usually creates chains. It traps people inside cycles of resentment, obsession, and revenge. Those chains become visible through constant emotional reactions. But when you refuse to wear those chains, people start questioning whether they ever had power over you in the first place. Their confidence begins to collapse because it depended on your emotional dependence. The mind hates unfinished stories. That's why people revisit conversations years later. That's why they replay memories before sleeping. They search for closure. When you refuse to react according to their expectations, you leave the story unfinished inside their minds. They become the ones searching for answers, while you quietly build a life that no longer requires their approval. Your silence isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's choosing long-term transformation over short-term satisfaction. It's understanding that every emotional reaction is an investment, and not everyone deserves access to your emotional wealth. Every minute spent proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is a minute stolen from becoming the person betrayal accidentally created. Eventually, they stop asking why you didn't react. They begin asking something far more unsettling. Who did that experience turn you into? The knife rarely announces itself before it enters your back. It usually arrives wearing a smile you once trusted, speaking with a voice you once believed, standing beside you close enough to know exactly where to strike. That's the cruel psychology of betrayal. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from people who had access to your loyalty, your kindness, your confidence, and your silence. They didn't just know your strengths. They knew where your defenses disappeared. They expected that one calculated act would leave you questioning your worth forever. What they never realized was that betrayal doesn't expose the strength of the betrayer. It exposes the weakness hidden inside them, while giving you the opportunity to discover a version of yourself that comfort could never create. Weak people betray because they confuse temporary advantage with permanent victory. They believe that deception is intelligence, manipulation is power, and disloyalty is strategy. For a short time, it even appears that they're winning. They receive attention, validation, opportunities, or applause. They convince themselves they escaped accountability because the consequences aren't immediate. But psychology has always worked differently. Character isn't revealed when life is easy. It's revealed when someone is given the opportunity to choose between integrity and convenience. Betrayal is simply the moment they choose convenience. Strong people suffer differently. They don't immediately understand how someone they cared about could deliberately become the source of their pain. Their first instinct isn't revenge, it's confusion. They replay conversations, searching for the exact moment everything changed. They wonder whether they missed warning signs or ignored obvious truths because they wanted to believe the best in someone. That questioning feels painful, but it also becomes the beginning of wisdom. Every honest question sharpens awareness. Every painful realization strengthens perception. The person who betrayed you often believes they stole something irreplaceable. They think they stole your confidence, your peace, your trust, or your future. In reality, they only stole the illusion that everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. That illusion had to disappear eventually. Better to lose a false belief than to lose your entire future protecting it. There is a dangerous misconception that kindness makes people weak. The world often rewards loud confidence and aggressive personalities, making quiet loyalty appear fragile. But loyalty is not weakness. Trust is not weakness. Compassion is not weakness. Misusing someone else's kindness is weakness. Depending on deception because honesty isn't enough is weakness. Hiding behind manipulation because authenticity feels impossible is weakness. Think carefully about the psychology behind betrayal. A secure person rarely feels the need to destroy someone else's peace. Someone genuinely confident doesn't obsess over proving superiority through deception. People who betray often fight invisible battles inside themselves. Jealousy whispers that your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Insecurity convinces them your light somehow steals theirs. Fear tells them they must pull you down because climbing beside you feels too difficult. None of those emotions belong to you. They existed long before your name entered their story. This realization changes everything. You stop taking betrayal as evidence that you were insufficient. Instead, You recognize it as evidence that someone else's unresolved struggles eventually overflowed into your life. Their actions reveal their internal condition far more than they reveal your value. Pain has an unusual way of refining people. Comfort teaches habits. Betrayal teaches awareness. Comfort creates routines. Betrayal creates vision. Before betrayal, you may have judged people by their words. After betrayal, you begin noticing consistency, actions, patterns, and intentions. You stop listening only to promises and start paying attention to behavior. That single shift protects you more effectively than suspicion ever could. The strongest transformation isn't becoming cold toward everyone. It's becoming wise without becoming bitter. Bitterness allows the people who hurt you to keep controlling your future. Wisdom allows you to move forward while carrying the lesson instead of the wound. One imprisons you in yesterday. The other prepares you for tomorrow. Many people spend years trying to prove that the betrayer made a mistake. They chase success just to be noticed again. But real growth happens when your success is no longer connected to anyone else's opinion. You stop building your future as a response to your past. You build it because you've finally discovered who you are when validation is no longer the goal. There is something strangely liberating about realizing betrayal has limits. It can damage trust, but it cannot erase your potential. It can delay your confidence, but it cannot permanently destroy your purpose. It can create scars, but scars are evidence of survival, not defeat. Every scar silently declares that something painful happened, and yet you continued moving forward. Eventually, the roles begin to reverse. The betrayer continues searching for new people to manipulate because they never confronted the emptiness inside themselves. You continue evolving because the pain forced you into a conversation with your own character. One escapes responsibility, the other embraces growth. One repeats the cycle, the other breaks it. And in that quiet difference lies the truth they never wanted to face. Betrayal revealed exactly who was truly weak and exactly who was becoming unbreakable. The most dangerous mind in any room is not the loudest one. It is the one no one can read. Darkness doesn't always hide monsters. Sometimes it hides discipline. Sometimes it hides a soul that has learned the terrifying value of emotional control after being betrayed one too many times. The people around you once believed they had a map to your emotions. They knew which words would make you angry, which lies would make you defensive, which insults would make you doubt yourself. They believed your reactions were predictable, and predictability gave them power. Then one day, without warning, you stopped giving them the satisfaction of certainty. Human beings are addicted to patterns. The brain constantly searches for predictable behavior because predictability creates comfort. The moment someone believes they understand you, they become confident they can influence you. They know which compliment earns your trust. They know which criticism ruins your day. They know exactly how long it takes before you forgive them. They know how to manipulate your guilt, your kindness, your patience, and even your love. That's why emotionally predictable people often become emotional prisoners. Their reactions become routines, and routines become weapons in the hands of those who understand them. Now imagine what happens when that routine suddenly disappears. They expect an argument. You smile. They expect an apology. You stay silent. They expect desperation. You walk away. The entire psychological balance shifts. Their confidence begins to crumble because it was built on assumptions that no longer work. Suddenly they realize they're speaking to someone they no longer recognize. The same person stands in front of them, but something fundamental has changed. They can still see your face, but they can't see your next move. That uncertainty is deeply unsettling because people fear what they cannot predict. Being emotionally unpredictable doesn't mean becoming fake. It doesn't mean pretending not to care or playing childish games. It means refusing to let every emotion become public property. It means understanding that not every thought deserves a reaction, not every insult deserves an answer, and not every battle deserves your presence. Emotional maturity is not measured by how intensely you feel. It is measured by how wisely you decide which feelings deserve action. There is a silent confidence that develops when you stop reacting immediately. You begin observing more than speaking. You notice facial expressions people thought you ignored. You recognize hidden motives behind flattering words. You hear the hesitation before someone lies. While everyone else rushes to defend themselves, you gather information. Observation becomes your greatest advantage because people reveal far more than they realize when they think you've already reacted emotionally. This is why self-control often appears mysterious. Most people cannot separate emotion from action. The instant they feel something, they express it. Anger becomes shouting, fear becomes retreat, jealousy becomes gossip, insecurity becomes arrogance. They live as prisoners of their impulses, but the moment you create space between feeling and responding, you reclaim authority over your own mind. You are no longer being controlled by circumstances. You become the one deciding how much influence the world is allowed to have over your peace. Some people will mistake this transformation for coldness. They'll say you've changed. They'll complain that you're distant, harder to understand, or impossible to manipulate the way they once could. Listen carefully to those complaints. Often, they reveal more about what people lost than about who you've become. The people who benefited from your emotional predictability will naturally resist your emotional discipline because your growth removed their control. Psychology teaches us that uncertainty creates curiosity. That's why people become obsessed with unanswered questions. When you stop explaining every decision, justifying every boundary, or defending every choice, people begin creating stories to fill the silence. They spend hours trying to decode your behavior because your unpredictability forces them into a game they cannot win. While they're busy studying you, you're busy studying yourself. There is also another reason unpredictability carries power. It protects your future. When people cannot accurately predict your reactions, they struggle to predict your decisions. They don't know when you'll leave. They don't know what you'll tolerate. They don't know how far you'll grow. They don't know what goals you're quietly building. Your life stops becoming an open book and starts becoming a story whose next chapter belongs only to you. The strongest individuals rarely announce their transformation. They simply become different. One day they stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding them. They stop seeking approval from those who never intended to give it. They stop chasing explanations from people who already chose dishonesty over truth. Their energy shifts from proving themselves to improving themselves, and that is the moment everything changes. The same people who once believed they had mastered your mind suddenly realize they are standing before someone whose greatest strength is no longer intelligence, talent, or confidence. It is the quiet, unsettling fact that no one can predict what a healed mind will do next. The darkest prisons are not built from steel. They are built from memories that refuse to die. Every betrayal, every insult, every moment someone made you feel invisible becomes another brick in a silent cage inside your mind. Most people spend years living there without realizing the door was never locked. They replay the same scenes over and over, hoping the ending will somehow change. But the past has no mercy. It never rewrites itself. It only waits to see whether you will remain its prisoner or use it as the fire that reshapes you into someone impossible to break. Pain is one of the few forces in life that always demands payment. The question is not whether you will pay. The question is what you will receive in return. Some people spend their pain on anger. Others spend it on self-pity. Some waste it trying to convince those who hurt them to finally understand the damage they caused. But there is another investment that very few people make. They convert pain into power, invisible power. The kind that cannot be measured by applause, attention, or approval. Think about how iron becomes steel. It doesn't happen through comfort. It happens through unbearable heat and relentless pressure. Human character follows the same law. Every difficult experience exposes something hidden inside you. Sometimes it reveals fear. Sometimes it reveals courage you never knew existed. The people who betrayed you believed they were ending your story. In reality, they were placing you inside the furnace where your strongest version was waiting to be forged. This transformation is quiet. That is why most people fail to notice it until it is already complete. They expect dramatic revenge, emotional speeches, or visible signs of suffering. Instead, you begin making decisions they cannot see. You wake up earlier. You become disciplined when nobody is watching. You start reading instead of complaining. You strengthen your body because your mind refuses to stay weak. You learn new skills while others waste time discussing what happened to you. Every small decision becomes another piece of armor they never witnessed being created. Invisible power is dangerous because it doesn't seek recognition. Loud confidence often depends on an audience. Quiet confidence depends only on evidence. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes proof that you are becoming reliable. Every difficult morning you survive strengthens your belief that discomfort is no longer your enemy. Every temptation you resist reminds your mind that discipline is stronger than emotion. There is something fascinating about people who have truly transformed their pain. They rarely speak about revenge anymore. Not because they forgot what happened, but because their future has become more interesting than their past. Their energy is no longer trapped in old wounds. It is invested in new possibilities. This shift confuses people who expected you to remain emotionally connected to your suffering forever. Most individuals underestimate the compound effect of small improvements. One disciplined day changes very little. One disciplined year changes everything. Every workout, every book, every difficult conversation, every boundary you establish, every excuse you refuse to accept builds an identity that betrayal can no longer touch. Confidence is not created by positive thinking alone. It is built through repeated evidence that you can trust yourself. People often ask why successful individuals appear so calm under pressure. The answer isn't that they experience less fear. They have simply practiced surviving discomfort so many times that fear no longer controls their decisions. Pain trained them better than comfort ever could. Every hardship became another lesson instead of another excuse. One of the greatest mistakes people make after betrayal is trying to recover the person they used to be. That version of you belonged to a different chapter. Chasing your old self keeps you emotionally attached to a life that no longer exists. Real growth begins when you stop asking, "How do I become who I was?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming because of this?" That question changes everything. It shifts your attention away from loss and toward creation. The strongest people rarely announce their evolution. They don't need constant validation because their identity no longer depends on outside opinions. They move differently, think differently, and choose differently. Their standards become higher. Their circle becomes smaller. Their peace becomes more valuable than temporary excitement. They stop trying to impress everyone because they finally understand that protecting their energy is more important than protecting their image. Ironically, the people who once underestimated you become the first to notice these changes. They cannot explain why your presence feels different. Your words carry more weight because they are backed by experience instead of theory. Your silence feels intentional instead of uncertain. Your confidence no longer asks permission to exist. It simply does by the time they realize what their betrayal created. The version of you they thought they destroyed has already disappeared. In its place stands someone who no longer draws strength from the approval of others, but from the quiet certainty that every painful moment was secretly building a foundation no one else could see. The most haunting thing about your transformation is not that you became stronger. It is that you became impossible to explain. Somewhere in the shadows, the very people who once dismissed you are still trying to solve a mystery that grows deeper every day. They expected your story to end where they left you. Instead, every time they hear your name, they discover another version of you that shouldn't exist. That uncertainty becomes a silent obsession because the human mind cannot easily let go of what it fails to understand. People are naturally curious, but curiosity becomes obsession when expectations are shattered. The same individuals who ignored your presence suddenly pay attention to your absence. The ones who once overlooked your value begin searching for clues about your life. They ask mutual friends how you're doing. They secretly visit your social media. They compare the person they remember with the person they've heard you've become. They aren't always looking because they miss you. Many are looking because your growth challenges the story they created about you. Every person who underestimated you built an identity around one belief: you would always remain the same. They believed your confidence had limits. They believed your kindness could always be taken for granted. They believed your patience meant weakness. Most importantly, they believed they had already seen your full potential. That assumption made them comfortable. It allowed them to place you inside a mental box where your future seemed predictable. Then something unexpected happened. You changed while they stayed the same. Nothing unsettles people more than realizing they misjudged someone completely. The mind resists admitting such mistakes because doing so forces a painful question. If I was so wrong about them, what else am I wrong about? Rather than confronting that uncomfortable truth, many continue watching from a distance, hoping to find proof that your transformation is temporary. They wait for you to fail. They expect old habits to return. They believe your confidence is an act that will eventually collapse. But real transformation doesn't need constant attention to survive. It grows in silence. The interesting part is that you probably intended to become anyone's obsession. Your focus shifted inward. While others spent their energy discussing people, you spent yours rebuilding yourself. Every difficult decision, every lonely night, every promise you kept to yourself slowly created a life that no longer depended on outside validation. Ironically, that independence became the very thing that attracted attention. People notice those who no longer seek to be noticed. There is a psychological principle that explains this. Scarcity creates value. The more available someone is emotionally, the more easily others overlook them. But when someone becomes selective with their time, attention, and energy, perception changes. Suddenly, your presence feels rare. Your words carry greater weight because you no longer speak just to fill silence. Your approval becomes meaningful because you no longer give it freely. The same people who once ignored your existence begin wondering how they lost access to someone they never appreciated. Another reason they can't stop watching is because confidence exposes insecurity without saying a single word. Your progress becomes a mirror reflecting everything they refuse to improve within themselves. Every achievement reminds them of opportunities they wasted. Every boundary you establish reminds them of standards they never developed. Every peaceful moment you enjoy quietly confronts the chaos they continue creating in their own lives. This has nothing to do with arrogance. True confidence doesn't compete. It simply exists. That is why people often misunderstand genuinely transformed individuals. They mistake peace for pride. They interpret boundaries as hostility. They assume emotional control means emotional distance. In reality, you've simply stopped handing your emotional keys to people who repeatedly proved they couldn't be trusted with them. The greatest shift happens when you stop trying to answer every rumor, every misunderstanding, and every false opinion. You realize that people committed to misunderstanding you will always invent new reasons to do so. Defending yourself against every false narrative becomes an endless battle. Instead, you allow your life to become your response. Results speak with a voice that arguments never can. Over time, your evolution creates two very different reactions. Those with humility become inspired. They see your journey and realize change is possible for them too. But those trapped by ego become consumed by comparison. Instead of asking how you grew, they ask why you succeeded. Instead of learning from your discipline, they search for excuses that protect their pride. Watching you becomes easier than becoming you. Eventually, you understand something that changes the way you walk through the world. The goal was never to make people regret losing you. The goal was never to become the person they couldn't stop watching. Those things happen naturally as a consequence of your growth. The real victory was becoming someone who no longer measures success by the eyes that are watching, because your greatest transformation happened long before anyone else finally noticed it. The graveyard of broken dreams is filled with people who believed revenge would heal them. They spent years sharpening anger like a weapon, convinced that one perfect moment of payback would finally silence the pain. But darkness has a cruel habit of making people resemble the very things they once hated. The more they stared at those who betrayed them, The less they saw themselves. Their future became chained to their past. Their identity became a reaction instead of a creation. That is the trap waiting for anyone who allows betrayal to become the author of their life. The most terrifying response is not destruction. It is evolution so complete that the people who tried to break you can no longer recognize the person standing before them. Most people misunderstand revenge. They imagine dramatic confrontations, public humiliation, or watching those who hurt them finally suffer. Those moments may satisfy the ego for a few seconds, but they rarely transform a life. The emotional wound remains because revenge changes someone else's circumstances, not your own character. Evolution works differently. Every step you take toward becoming wiser, stronger, calmer, and more disciplined quietly removes another piece of the control your past once had over you. Think about the psychology of expectation. The people who betrayed you secretly expect one thing. They expect to continue living inside your mind. They believe you will replay the betrayal, talk about it endlessly, and carry it into every future relationship. They assume they have left a permanent fingerprint on your identity. In many cases, that belief gives them a false sense of importance. They mistake the pain they caused for lasting influence. Now imagine what happens when they discover you built an extraordinary life without needing their apology. That realization strikes harder than any insult ever could. Your success becomes undeniable evidence that they were never as powerful as they imagined. They believed they were writing your ending. Instead, they accidentally became a single chapter in a much larger story. The moment you stop needing closure from the people who created the wound is the moment you finally become free. Freedom is not forgetting what happened. Freedom is remembering without surrendering your peace. There is an invisible difference between surviving and evolving. Survival means you continue breathing after the damage. Evolution means the damage itself becomes the reason you discover strengths that comfort would never have revealed. Every disappointment teaches discernment. Every betrayal teaches boundaries. Every loss teaches gratitude. Every setback teaches patience. What once appeared to be destruction slowly reveals itself as preparation. People often ask why certain individuals seem almost impossible to intimidate after difficult seasons in life. The answer is simple. They have already faced pain that demanded everything from them. Once you've rebuilt yourself from emotional ruins, ordinary challenges lose their ability to frighten you. You stop fearing rejection because you've survived abandonment. You stop fearing criticism because you've already questioned yourself more harshly than anyone else ever could. You stop fearing failure because you understand that every meaningful transformation begins with discomfort. This is where true confidence is born, not from compliments, not from applause, not from popularity. It grows from keeping promises to yourself when nobody else is watching. The strongest revenge is waking up every morning with goals that no longer include proving anyone wrong. That shift changes your entire energy. Instead of asking, how do I make them regret what they did? You begin asking, how do I become someone I respect? The first question gives power to the past. The second creates your future. People will notice the difference before you even speak. Your posture changes because you no longer carry unnecessary emotional weight. Your decisions become clearer because they're no longer clouded by resentment. Your relationships improve because you stop punishing innocent people for wounds caused by someone else. Your standards become higher because you've learned what happens when you ignore red flags. Every lesson quietly upgrades the quality of your life. Ironically, the people who expected your downfall often become witnesses to your rise. They search your life for signs that you're secretly miserable because admitting your happiness would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. But real peace cannot be hidden forever. It appears in the way you speak. It appears in the confidence of your silence. It appears in your discipline, your patience, and your refusal to be distracted by meaningless battles. One day, someone will mention the people who betrayed you. You won't feel rage. You won't feel the need to defend yourself. You won't even feel the urge to prove anything. You'll simply realize they unknowingly introduced you to the strongest version of yourself, a version that values peace over chaos. purpose over revenge, discipline over emotion, and growth over bitterness. And that is the one reaction they never studied, because no one ever expects the person they tried to destroy to become completely unreachable through pain.